Hello, chefs. Today I'm talking with renowned food photographer Bill Brady about his rise in the photography industry. I am Mark Grigsby, your chef and guide through this experience, and this is the IncrEDIBLE Discourse.
All systems go.
Welcome to the show, Bill. I'm super glad you are on today. I would like for you to explain to us everything that you do and why it's significant to our industry. In our call that we spoke about yesterday about the show, obviously you know that it's a cooking show for the industry and chefs and everything alike. And I was really interested in having you as a guest on the show because of this is an element that I think a lot of chefs don't really see or understand until it's like, hey, we're going to do a photo shoot and now we're going to bring in Bill Brady and this is how we're going to do it. And then it's like kind of learning on the job and you don't really know what to expect. At least that's what happened in my experience. So why don't you start off by telling us who you are, your company, and then kind of give us a little origin story.
Sure. So thank you for having me. It's nice to
Yes,
meet
sir.
you and nice to be on here. So my name is Bill Brady and I'm a food photographer and a tabletop director. And basically what that means is that, I'm a commercial photographer. So most of the work that I do is for commerce, whether it be for restaurants, but mostly my work is involved that I'm involved in is for companies like Boar's Head and Walmart and larger companies that need a specialized food photographer. Now, originally, I kind of grew up in an Italian American household, even though my last name is Brady. My mom's Italian, so we were really like entrenched in the whole food culture. And my grandfather owned a bar and a restaurant in Manhattan called Puffy's Tavern. So every Sunday we go to my grandmother's in Brooklyn. We'd have a 12-hour meal, and my parents would drive back to Long Island where I grew up. And we did that until my grandfather passed away, and then we kind of kept that tradition going in my town because my grandmother moved in with my aunt. But
Okay.
I actually, oddly enough, I always loved food, but I always loved cooking. And I was also like really into photography as a kid. So they were like two of my biggest passions. And it was weird because I never really understood that you could take food photos for a living until I had like an aha moment, which is, I was working in corporate America after I graduated from college, and I really couldn't stand working for anybody, and I was really unhappy. And I kept walking past. We had a Barnes and Noble like in my office building in Manhattan, and I kept seeing that goofy book from Tony Robbins called "Awaken the Giant Within," and I was so miserable that I was like, you know what? Maybe this guy's got something to say. So I bought the book. I read it like cover to cover, and within like a month and a half, I had formulated my plan to get out of corporate America, and I quit my job. And I didn't have a job, so I started shooting headshots, models, bands, and I was okay, but like I was starting to like panic a little bit about money. And this guy that lived in my building, and I lived in Hoboken at the time, he's like, oh, I work for a tabletop director named Alex Fernbach, and he's looking for a new production assistant because I'm leveling up. He leveled up, this guy Paul McCarthy, and he leveled up to like a production manager, which is somebody who kind of also like a little bit under a producer. Anyway, long story short, I went on the set, and it opened up an entire world to me. Like it was really incredible. So these guys would shoot Wendy's commercials, Burger, like all these commercials, Dunkin' Donuts and, of Kraft. And I really like got to see, oh my God, this is a thing. And once like I understood that food photography was a thing, I was like, oh, that's what I want to do. Getting there was a little bit more complicated. Back then, everything was shot on film, and I needed to portfolio, and it was challenging because A, it was expensive, and B, you needed a food stylist to actually make the food for camera. But what was cool was Alex and those guys would let me shoot stills during the film shoot. So like they would put the food out and then they'd be like, hey, take some stills. So I was actually able to build a little bit of a food portfolio using like really high end food stylists and DPs who like were getting paid thousands of dollars a day to light the food. But I learned from them like how to light, and I really got into it. And then I did that for a couple of years, and I really went down like the rabbit hole into like digital and trying to figure out photo retouching. And I kind of quit doing production assistant work because it was very grueling, 18, 20-hour days. And I wasn't super young. I think I was like 28 when I finally quit being a production assistant. And I just kind of like did a little bit of graphic design. I got introduced to a food photographer named Bill Helms, who really wasn't shooting a lot of food at the time, but his client was the Food Emporium, and which is a subsidiary of the A&P supermarkets, which have gone
Okay.
out of business. And what happened was I got to know the agency, and over the course of a few years, I started doing like graphic design work for them as an art director, and kind of bridging the gap between film and digital, because when we were still shooting film, and you'd have to shoot like positive like chromes and then scan them into the computer, and there was like a niche for that. So I did photo
Huh.
retouching and I did all that kind of stuff. And then when Bill was getting ready to retire, the agency asked me if I wanted to take his spot, and I had kind of resisted. But then the client was like, "Listen, we're not renewing Bill's contract." He was like almost 70 at the time,
Oh,
and he
wow.
had a long storied career. And finally, I was like, "All right, fine." If they basically put it to me like, "If you don't do this, somebody else is going to do it, but we want you to do it."
Right.
So, what happened was I really didn't. We weren't really shooting a lot of food, and I had my experience with the film production. So they gave me 40 days worth of food photography, and I created a digital workflow. I bought this like Nikon Fuji hybrid, digital SLR, like one of the first ones, and it was a decent price point. It was like under 10,000 for the whole kit, and back then, like digital cameras were like $100,000.
Really?
Crazy
Oh,
amount of money, and you couldn't shoot food with them because they were too slow. They did like like either a scan back, which did like a really slow like scan like a scanner, or this leaf camera did like a 3-pass with red, green, and blue filters. Anyway, you couldn't shoot food because the food would move in the middle of an
right.
exposure.
And
So
around what year was this?
this was like 1998,
Oh, okay.
1999.
So yeah,
So, it was right when digital, like, it was starting to be a thing, but it was, like most photographers were still shooting film. And I actually remember people would like look at me like, what is that? Like they were really curious. So, but basically, I faked it till I made it, and I had
right.
40 days worth of photography. And I hired a food stylist. I was shooting out of my loft in Manhattan at the time. I was living, I had a place in Manhattan at that point, and really, I just kind of learned how to do it. And it, I took to it pretty fast. As soon as I really had the opportunity and the means to shoot. But what was interesting was back then, food photographers did like 2, 3 shots in a day, and I was producing like 9 shots in a day. But
And
what I wasn't,
and, and
again, I'm sorry.
can you walk me through like what a shot is exactly? So if you say they do two
Sure.
shots a
So
day, so yeah.
it's basically a plated styled shot or like a group shot, a turkey on a set with, gravy, like it depended. Like we used to do a lot of the holiday stuff. So it would be like an elaborate, Thanksgiving setup. But
Oh, okay.
we were shooting on film. So you'd have to shoot it on like a 4x5 camera, which is like one of those old timey cameras that you see in the Civil War. Matthew Brady used to use one,
Yeah.
and everything's like upside down, and you have to load your film in manually, and then you do
Okay.
your photo shoot, and then you bring your film down to the lab, and like at noon, everybody, like all the photographers in New York, were dropping their film off for a rush, um, you know, uh, process. So we
Right.
shot a slide film, and it took an hour and a half. So we went out to lunch, and then we'd see if what we got was okay, and then we go back and shoot another shot. So really, the whole day, you
Ah.
basically took 2 days, the entire day to do 3 shots. So when the
Oh,
digital
okay.
workflow came in, I was like producing 4 times 5 times as much photos for the client, and they didn't know the difference. What I didn't tell them was I was shooting like 18 of them, and half of them were terrible because I was learning.
Right, right, right,
And
right,
I like to tell you, I took a lot of really bad food photos before I figured out how to take a lot of how to take good food photos. So,
right.
and that's basically how I got going. And then from there, my career just kind of took off. And A&P went out of business in 2011. But at that point, I had established myself. So I got actually the day that I lost the Food Emporium account, which I had for like 10 years. I got my biggest job in my career, which is shooting package designs for Walmart. And I
Yes.
so I wound up shooting like 400 or so SKUs for them, and they paid by the picture because they
Oh man.
own the photos, and like so the minimum amount of money for like a simple shot of like sugar on a spoon was $1,000, and then
Wow.
the biggest price, I think it was like $2,100 for a complicated shot like a sandwich. And we were doing like 15, 20, 30 of these in a day. Like my food stylists and I were
Wow.
cranking these things, and I made so much money. But the gig only lasted like 12 weeks, and then
Right.
I didn't work for months because it was during the recession. It was like 2010. And so I kind of resituated. We folded the agency, and I went out on my own. And I've never looked back. It's been a great experience. It's so fun being a food photographer. It's different every day, and it's just being able to solve problems in real time is really my job. Is like that, and I'm in the service business, so it's my job to like handhold clients, make sure that the productions go smoothly. So I wear a lot of hats. Is basically what
Right.
I'm.
And so you started your own thing. So Bill Brady Photography, that started when, 2012, 20?
I incorporated my business in 2008, and
Okay.
I was partners with an ad agency. So, but I was working as like a 1099 employee
Oh,
basically because
okay.
I didn't want to go on payroll because wanted to run all my business through my corporation for a lot of different reasons. And so I had the whole infrastructure set up under my name when the agency folded. And I basically I didn't have to do anything. I just moved to an office, and then I was renting studio space at that point because I had a studio, but we got rid of the space. It was too expensive.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I'm going to I'm going to throw you into a scenario. So let's say I
Sure.
contact Bill Brady Photography and I want you to come shoot my menu.
Okay.
Can you take me through the day, the photo shoot, I guess, kind of a couple of days before, and then the entire process of how a chef would contact Bill Brady Photography and get their menu shot?
Yeah, so usually what happens is it starts with like a pre-production call, and we go over the goals and the objectives. And I like to explain to, to chefs, listen, we don't have to shoot the entire menu. We can shoot, a lot of it, but it depends on your budget. So if you only have a budget allocated for one day, we could probably do like 20, 25 plated shots in a single day. Excuse me. If you start to add in group shots and all that other kind of stuff, it really adds to the time because you think about like if you have 12 dishes and you have to put them all in a frame and you have to move all the objects around, like that eats up the clock. If you just have like single dishes, drinks, then you can shoot a lot more in a day. And we just kind of like figure out the objectives and the budget. So I
Right.
get paid by the day, and I have a day rate, and it depends on who's calling me. For larger companies like the Boar's Heads, I have a much higher day rate, and for restaurants, I lower that fee down because I know that they're not going to be able to afford that unless it's a chain like PF Chang. Like PF Chang's is one of my customers, so I charge them full rate for my
Right.
services.
Okay. And so you, after the call, I guess you set a date, you talk the budget, everything is set. So on the before you arrive, what does that look like for you? So I'm in Cypress, Texas. I own a restaurant here and I want you to come down. So obviously you would travel down to where I'm at, right? So what does that look like for you?
So I usually, if I'm traveling, I'll bring my camera and computers, and then I'll rent equipment, in the place where we're shooting, and then I'll hire like a local assistant to pick me up and help me get to the set and help me on set. But usually, what happens is we go through a game plan, we figure out the menu items, and then it's my job to control the food coming out. So like it's funny, I some chefs are like, "Oh, this is going to take an hour," right? I'm like, "No, this is going to take the whole. This is going to take the whole day."
Yeah.
And they look at me like kind of sideways, and I'm like, "This is going to take the whole day." And then once we start shooting, they're like, "Oh, I understand." So what I generally do is when I work for a restaurant, I have the chefs plate the food, and then I style it on set, which means so food styling is a fancy word for plating. And
Okay.
not all chefs are as proficient as others in plating. Like, so for example, if you go to a Michelin restaurant, all the chefs in the kitchen have tweezers, right? And they're like putting microgreens and like really daintily putting the food on. That's really what a food stylist does. And a lot of chefs like understand how to create food for for eat consumption, but they really don't get they don't understand the subtle nuance of food styling. And so what I do is I bring my food styling tools with me. And I've learned over the years, I've worked with like some of the top food stylists in New York. And, I picked up all their tricks. And, so basically they'll give me the plate and then I'll deconstruct it, or I'll add things, fix the holes. And so what we do is we create like a workflow. And usually what happens is every 15 or 20 minutes, I'm ready for a new dish.
Okay.
Whereas if I'm shooting on set with a food stylist, it's actually a little slower than that, because the food stylists are really trained to like meticulously do it. The good news is like food styling is a lot looser now than it was back when I started. So you could get a little bit more abstract with your stuff. But the whole point of a food photo is you have to want to eat the image. So
Right.
my definition of food photography is if your food photo doesn't make you hungry, it doesn't really succeed.
Right.
And I think that's lost on a lot of photographers these days. Like if you notice, like if you went to like Kava and Sweet Green and a bunch of those places that all do the bowls, if you took all the branding out, right? And you put the food photography next to each other, like three, would you be able to even tell which brand was which? Because they all shoot the exact same thing. They shoot a bowl overhead with the hard light, and it's technically proficient and it's geometrically cool, but to me that's not like appetizing. For me, like appetizing food is like I call it, I don't call it, but people call it food porn. It's like you
Hmm.
get really up into the food and it's intimate, and you want like my whole thing is like, do I want to grab that off the screen and eat it? Do I want to adventure into that restaurant? And I think these days a lot of food photography is representational of what you get versus an emotion, which is what I learned food photography should be when I was doing it.
So, so when you show up on site, I'm and you're guiding the chefs, right? I'm assuming because if it was me, I I'm would be very humble and say, okay, well, Bill, what do you think that these are the dishes that I have. Tell
Right.
me, how can you make them look as great as possible? So, so how much of that happens? Is that like purely what you do on site? Like you're talking to the chef? Do you ever get like pushback from the chefs telling you, no, I want it to be this way? Like how does that work exactly during the shot?
Usually not. I mean, it's pretty interactive. Like I enjoy the team process, and there's always room for conversation and interpretation. Like, so I have my opinion about something, but you as a restaurant owner or chef, you may like, well, no, I really want to do it this way, and then I'm happy to oblige that. Usually, what I'll do is I'll shoot it the way that the chef wants it, and then I'll kind of do my own thing. I'll add a couple of shots in, and a lot of times they'll agree with my position. Like, you know you don't have to show the entire dish. You know what I mean? You can go in close, but showing an entire dish is useful for like specific types of menu items. The overhead shot is good for certain types of menu items. But what I generally do is it's called lagniappe, and it's a like New Orleans expression, which means always give a little extra.
Okay.
So it's not just I'm going to shoot these shots regimented overhead, and a lot of times I actually have two cameras going. When I just did the shoot for PF Chang's, we had an overhead shot that had to get done, and then there was another shot that like was more interpretive. And so what I did was like I had two cameras, and I would just pull one camera out of the off the computer and plug the other one in, and I was literally going off two sets. And I do that, and that you get a lot more bang for your buck because the overhead shot is static. The camera doesn't generally move, and it's all framed up and lit. So if you leave that alone, you get a lot more work done, especially if you're doing those close-ups and you're doing like those food porny shots or even group shots in a setting where you need depth of field, which is like what's out of focus in the picture.
Oh, wow. And so after you complete the day and you have all of your shots, what does that look like on your end to deliver to the brand?
Yeah, so it's pretty simple. So I tether my camera to the computer and I shoot through a software called Capture One, which is really cool. You can actually take a template and a screenshot of something or like a template and put it into the camera. Like so, let's say you're shooting for a website and
Okay.
they have that long horizontal. Well, we can put that long horizontal template into the software, and then we can like see where the type goes and like if we have to move something to the right or to the left, and then it falls precisely in there, and it works really good for package design. But usually I try to shoot in camera to get like I try not to do too much post production, even though I'm an accomplished photo retoucher. I've been working in Photoshop since the early 90s, and I love it. But I also have a life, so I try to like light it and shoot it and compose it and do everything in camera, and then it doesn't take me very long to do the post
That's
production,
what I was
and
going to
then
ask you. Yeah.
yeah, I try. There's always a problem. There's always like flecks of stuff and dust and all this. But that it's minimal. I'm not literally reconstructing photos, nor am I lighting with Photoshop. And that's the
Right.
key. Like the better your picture is, it's garbage in, garbage out. So the better photographer you are, the less work you have on the back end. So usually I can turn a job around in a day or two because it takes me like an hour or two to do the post production. Sometimes it takes longer. It just depends on
Right.
what the client wants. But and then I just send them an upload. I send them a link with the photos, and it's a permanent link. And if God forbid they lose the photos, they just call me up and say, "Hey, Bill, I lost the pictures," which, believe it or not, happens a lot.
I
And I just resend them a link, and so
okay.
everything's permanent. And then I also record it. I have it on backup drives. So
Okay.
very rarely do I lose it. I mean, I've gotten calls from people 5 years later, like, "Hey, man,
Oh,
we
wow.
lost our discs or whatever. Can you send me? Do you have the photos?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I usually have them." Once in a while you lose something, but that's just that's
And
life.
so on the bigger commercial accounts like the Walmarts or the Boar's Head or the PF, well, maybe not the PF Chang's, but on the ones where you have to shoot a lot of SKUs, like you said, do they have a specific, I guess, test kitchen that you show up to and do the shot, or how does that work exactly?
It all depends. So I have a studio in Brooklyn. It's a culinary studio. It has a kitchen, which also can double as a set. I also shoot up here. I'm in the Disco Farmhouse in upstate New York, and but a lot of times they'll come to the studio or I'll go on site, and it depends on the company. So for the Walmart job, we shot that all in my studio, but we were connected via the internet to the art director down in Carolina and the client in Walmart. So they were approving shots. So I take a picture, it shows up on my screen, and then the client can look at it in real time.
Oh, okay.
So it
Okay.
creates. So I don't have to physically be in a location to do food photography. I think the weirdest place I had a client in France, and we were doing truffle stuff, and we just did it all over the internet, and it's easier when a client's there because you have their attention and
Right.
they don't get pulled. But if that's the only way a client can do it, that's totally fine.
Oh, wow. That's super interesting. So, a lot of what you do is at the core being flexible for the client.
Yeah, so what I like to tell people is I'm actually not in the photography business. I'm in the service business. And years ago photographers could be difficult, because they were artists and it was their vision and there was a lot of pushback on ideas. And I realized the long and I've been doing this for a long time, like 25, 26 years. And I realized that you never get anywhere by giving people resistance. What you want to do is make them feel heard and then give them the opportunity to see it in a different way. So, what I generally do is I will always do the shot that the client wants. Even if I don't like it, if I don't agree with it, it's fine. It's really none of my like there's intelligence that goes behind things that I'm not aware of. There's ad agencies, there's creative, there's levels of marketing teams, and who am I to tell them like that their vision is wrong?
Right.
But on the other hand, like if they're they want something and it looks weird to me, I'm like, here's your shot, but I think that I would like to do it this way. And then again, they get an extra shot. It doesn't matter. They don't
Right.
have to use it.
Right.
So,
And
but
so, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say my job is to solve problems for people in real time. And, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of I'll give you an example. So I'm shooting for Ian's gluten-free, fish sticks and meatballs and all that stuff. And I got the sketches from the client, and they're practically like done pieces of artwork, right? So the clients gave me the templates. The problem is nobody went out and looked at the product, like in reality. So the product was like 3 times smaller than the scale that they had drawn it in. So right. So they had all these bowls for ketchup and napkins and all this stuff in the shot, and none of it fit because the fish sticks were half this, they were tiny.
Right.
So how do you solve for that? So what I wound up actually doing was, those spice caps, the caps on tops of like little spice jars.
Yep.
So I took one off and I put it in the shot, and it was the exact scale that it needed to be. And then we filled that with ketchup, and we gave it a little swirl, and then we were fine. But the clients were like, "Oh, those plates are too big, and that's too big," and I'm like, I have like airplane forks, little mini ones,
Little mini ones. Yeah.
little mini stuff, like in case that like little mini bowls, just in case like something doesn't work scale wise. So if you solve the problem before they walk in the door, then you don't lose any time. Like time is the biggest enemy on a commercial food set, because once you're shooting, everyone's getting paid. And when you scale that up to a crew with assistants, I've done big jobs with prop stylists, producers, everyone's getting paid, and they're getting paid a lot of money. So if you're sitting there trying to figure it out on set, that's the most expensive time.
Right.
So
Right.
you kind of have to imagine all the things that can go wrong, and solve for those problems. And then while you're shooting, there's always going to be something that goes wrong, but at least you've got your bases covered.
But that's great though. So truly the amount of experience that you have kind of helps you in that regard, because I can see a world where you're trying to fix a lot of problems on the set and then time is just blowing through and then you don't get a chance to finish, or something gets left out, and then both sides have to make the compromise to either extend the time or rebook or do something else. So
Right.
experience matters in a massive amount here. That's
Oh
great.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I like to tell my clients, you're paying me because I've already taken the picture.
Right.
Like, most photographers don't, and I'm not all of them, but a lot of photographers don't have the experience to, oh, I've done this, I've done that. If you ask me for a portfolio just of pizza, I could make a portfolio just of pizza. So I have so much practical experience, and in problem solving. To be perfectly candid, like still photography is fairly easy at this point for me because I don't there's rarely a situation that I haven't encountered in my years of shooting. And obviously, there's always there's always learn stuff to learn too.
Right.
And I've encountered problems, but because I know not to panic, because I know I'm going to solve the problem, I generally solve it pretty fast, and then we're off to the races.
So I want to talk to you about your course that you're developing, but before I go into that one, because I want you to expand a lot on it. In our conversation that we had yesterday, you touched on you were a director for videography and commercials at one point. Could you tell us and unpack a little bit of that experience and what that looks like and how that was for you?
Sure. So it really just directing commercials, and it's the same as doing set photography. The only difference is that the camera's moving. It's a bigger scale. It's a larger crew, and there's a lot more money involved. Like I just did some spots for PF Chang's. We had like 13 people on the crew.
Oh,
We
wow.
had the and like I don't touch the when I don't shoot, I don't touch the camera. I just direct. So I hire a director of photography. We hire, and then he's got his team of guys. Like there's one guy just sitting there pulling focus. So like when the camera moves from position A to position B, he's in another room with a remote, like pulling the focus. You shoot with a probe lens, like going through stuff that you have to continuously focus the camera, otherwise stuff goes blurry. That's a hard job. Like that, I have no desire to, like, I'm not a camera guy,
Right.
but I like directing, commercials, and then there's also talent involved. So you have to tell the talent like what to do. So in this case, there were people having these, these meals, and they were young, millennials, and they're taking selfies. And so the first part of the morning was we shot all the food, like the food elements, the food porn stuff. And then the next part of the day, we were shooting, putting plates on a table, having people drink, having people laugh, and then moving them around the restaurant. So we actually shot in the restaurant. So,
Oh,
um,
wow.
but it's really the same. It's all the same skill sets, and it's just on a bigger scale, to be honest with you.
And when you agree to do a commercial for one of these brands, is it similar to how you explained with like the fish sticks and the packaging? They send you some draw ups or some mock ups of what they would like, and then you kind of write out the timeline or the timestamps of what shots go where, or how do you determine what your day looks like so that you can direct effectively?
Well, usually what happens is we go through an ad agency, and the ad agency actually does the creative. And then we have what we call pre-production meetings where we all decide on, what we're doing, the shots, camera angles. They usually send me an inspiration board or a lookbook in order to, we like this mood. We like the way this is lit. We like the camera angles here. And then really it's my job to execute that.
Okay.
And then what happens is, there's a producer so when I shoot with jobs like that, it's actually easier because all I have to do is show up, and tell people what to do,
Right.
versus when I'm shooting with my, by myself and an assistant, then I have to, I have to lug equipment into the restaurant.
And do the
You
work,
know,
right?
you're right. I have to do
Hmm.
everything, but it both are equally fun. It's just the difference is that it's a bigger scale. But when I work with an agency, usually they do the creative, and my input is minimal compared to if you were a restaurant owner and you said, I want you to shoot my menu, but I don't have any idea, like I have no creative. Then I come in and I have to like wear that hat too. And a lot of times we'll establish a look and feel for the brand, and that takes a little bit of time during the day. So a lot of times we might have to shoot 2 days if they're going from scratch. If they just want like plated food on white, I mean that's easy. It's just you just shoot that on a white background. But if you're incorporating props and you're incorporating different kinds of spoons and drinks and all that kind of stuff, then it gets a little bit more complicated. And we like every restaurant has a look and feel and a tone, and what we want to do is kind of capture that spirit, but not like use it as a not show, like, let's say we're shooting a plate of salmon, right?
Okay.
Excuse me. Now, if I'm pulled back too far to show the restaurant, I'm not seeing the food. I'm seeing a plate of salmon on a table. But if I pull closer in with the camera, but I still incorporate, the table, a little bit of the background, out of focus, then we're getting that mood. We're getting that, branding for the client that they need. So it's really kind of a compromise, like, of what makes a food photo look appetizing versus what it looks like in an environment. And it's kind of like a push pull kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, um, I want to talk about the origins of this course, right? So now we've mapped out what it takes to go through a photography session, the videography, all of the things that kind of make the day, right? And now I would like for you to kind of explain how this course came to be, because it's super interesting. Our conversation yesterday, I walked away thinking, wow, what an amazing thing to give back, to show people, because in my experience in the restaurants, you want people to come into the door, right? But most often nowadays, they're Googling you or they're searching on the internet. And if your photography or your shots are not good, you dramatically decrease the chances of them coming to you, right? It's not even about return customers, it's about new customers. And so that's kind of like where your niche is, I guess, in what you're trying to do. So the course is phenomenal. I would like for you to kind of tell everybody about it and how it came to be.
Sure. So, really what inspired me to look into this, to see if it was even viable, was, I'm a big LinkedIn guy. I'm very active on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I see these chefs just posting the worst food photos. And I'm saying to myself, like, if you're trying to attract customers, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Because people eat with their eyes. And, the problem with most culinary professionals is that they think that because their food tastes good and they have a cool restaurant, that everybody knows that, and everybody's going to, like, genuflect when they see their, oh, look, I made a braised short rib on a thing. But if the photo does not look appetizing, they're gone.
They're gone.
Like, I think, like, it's between 1.5 and 3 seconds somebody looks on a site before they bounce, unless you can hook them.
Right.
So, I kind of, like, was looking at what are the pain points that chefs have when it comes to food photography. And obviously the expense is one of the pain points, because if you have a menu and you shoot it and then you change your menu, how many times do you have to bring a professional photographer in to do that? The other thing is, like, let's say that photographer has moved on or they're not available and you need to bring in somebody else. Their opinion of their style is different from the style that the other photographer. So there's, like, an inconsistency. The other thing is, if you're relying on your customers to take pictures for you, for your socials and stuff, like that was, 12 years ago.
Right.
Like, everybody has to shoot food that people want to eat. And the way that they determine that is, how does it look in a photo?
Right.
So I kind of distilled that idea down, and I was like, all right, so what is the biggest pain point, which is chefs, well, what can they do first? First of all, they know how to plate food, which is food styling. They have access to food, which is kind of important. Like, if you're just an influencer, you need to go physically to a place where somebody is making food to shoot the food. If you're a chef, you're already shooting the food. You're already making the food. You have it on site.
Yep.
So if I could just teach these guys a few really key concepts about food photography to elevate their food into, like, something that people want to eat, then, that's a win. And the problem is, like, first of all, most people don't have professional cameras. They have their phones. And the issue with a phone is it's not set up to do food photography. It's set up to do people photography and landscape photography. So you have to you have to change your settings in your camera in order to do food photography. The other thing is most people have no idea how to light food. And that's the key really to photography is good lighting and good composition. So by basically teaching people how to set up their phone camera, and I advocate them using a tripod, which is not really something they're comfortable with. But my you know basic thesis statement here is, if the camera is moving and you're changing things on the set, you never get where you need to go. But if you can fix the position of the camera to one place, and then you put your dish down, and you need to tweak a few things, like add an herb here, and fill in a hole there, and then adjust your lighting, you're eliminating that variable, which is the camera's moving and it changes. Like it's hard to hit a moving target is basically what
Right.
I'm
Absolutely.
saying here. So a couple of really simple cheap pieces of equipment, learn how to use the light. And I advocate, like, people put a diffusion disc like in front of their light source so that it scatters the light and makes it easier for them to use. Now, I'm not interested in teaching these guys how to be photographers. Like, that's my job. What I'm interested in teaching them is how to make their food look really good on camera, and then they can do it in their own time. So if they have a spare half an hour on a Tuesday when it's dead, they can cook off a dish, throw it, figure out, I have lighting recipes, and I really I give 3 lighting recipes. I give 2 lighting recipes for natural light, and then I give 3 lighting recipes for artificial light. And I keep it really simple, and I try to explain why this works for food photography. I kind of go through, well, this is what makes a food photo bad, and then this is what makes a food photo good. And by kind of just giving you enough information that you can get going and shoot your food in a way that it's going to look appetizing, then these guys are going to take to this. Like, chefs are awesome, and they're smart people. And it like, just think of it like as the last ingredient in your recipe. Like, you did your dish, you made your recipe, and it looks amazing, but then you don't know how to translate that to a photograph. It's just a matter of tweaking a lighting, camera angle, and then doing a couple of food styling tips. And everybody knows how to plate food. So I do a food styling section, but it's not like to become a professional food styler.
Right.
It's
Right.
like, what works in food styling and what can you use. And it's really simply like, you took your pic, you're getting your photo done, and then what your meat dries out, right? All you have to do is take a paintbrush, like and just paint a little oil back onto
Oh,
the thing, and now it glistens. Food needs to be wet, it needs to be moist. If you're shooting a veg, you don't hit it with oil, you hit it with water. So you have a little spray bottle, and like, so you put those finishing touches at the end, and you're ready to go. Just light it simply. And you could really do a lot of work in a day as a chef, just knowing how to light, compose, put your pictures, put your camera on a tripod, and you can roll dishes in and out, and like, you can do most of your menu. Like, if you had a full day, obviously you're going to waste the food, but give it to your staff.
right. Give it to your, yeah,
make
absolutely.
a family meal,
Right.
like, whatever.
And what would you say in your preference? You prefer artificial lighting or natural lighting, or does that depend on the situation, the food?
So lighting is lighting. There are advantages to natural light. There are advantages to artificial light. I prefer to use artificial light. And the reason I prefer to use artificial light is, once you set it, it's set. And you can also tweak the light. The sun is a movable object. So the sun comes up at a certain point and it moves across the atmosphere, it moves across the horizon, and then it sets, right? So first of all, you're limited to shooting during sunlight hours, which most restaurants, like, they're busy prepping food and doing all this, stuff. So you also need a source of natural light. So if you're in a dark restaurant with no windows, like, what do you do?
What do you do?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But natural light's beautiful, and it has a lot of, like, aesthetic qualities. But the way that I have broken down the lighting recipes are, you can use either or. You get the same result. The only difference is when you're using natural light, you're fighting with the sun moving. But when we put diffusion in front of the sun, then it evens it out, so you don't really have to worry if the clouds move in and out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're shooting with raw light and it's a windy day and it's cloudy, 1 second it's sunny, and then the next minute it's not sunny, and your exposure changes, and you're trying to fight all these variables. And if you're not a photographer, like, you just want to kill you want to pull your hair out. It's just it's tough, right? Because you don't have the experience to solve for those variables. So
Yeah.
what I've done is I've distilled it into very simple ways that you can elevate your, learn how to do this. Now, I do advocate, once you learn how to do the rules, you can break the rules. You can do whatever you want. But if you understand the basic principles of why lighting from the side is good and lighting from behind, like, food doesn't like to be lit in the front. It makes it look terrible. So if you ever seen a flash photo of food, it just looks like, it looks like a wanted poster. It's terrible, right? It's really no good.
Yeah.
But, and most people, when they take their food pictures, they've had a happy accident where everything lines up and it's really good. What the course does is it explains to you how to do this, like, in a formulaic way where it's not a happy accident. It's actually intentional, because everything in a food photo is intentional. When we're doing it, where the the background props are, how much to include, what not to include, and I do. There's like 7 layers. It's like 2.5 hours worth of video, and to be perfectly honest, you only really have to watch the first 4 in order to like be able to shoot. And it's just basic stuff. Excuse me. It's just basic stuff. And then once you start shooting, then you can figure out what works for you. Like, I can do this. I can't really shoot during office hours. So maybe I have to get an artificial, like one photo light. But, I'm doing one light setups. And then all we're doing is we're using cards to bounce the light. So you don't really have to know photography. You just have to follow the recipe.
Right.
And
so the course, so is it going to be on your photography website? How can people access this? And talk me through where to find it, and then how, once I pay for it, once I'm set up, what that looks like.
So I platformed it on it's a platform called Course Creator Pro, and the reason I went with it is because it has all the different, like, templates and things. Because I don't care about web, like, I'm not a web guy or anything, and I don't really need to code, but I needed a place that will host it. So I purchased the URL. You can find the course on chefshootfood.com, and then what that does is it once you sign up for the course, it's not very expensive. It's $229, and if you hired a really photographer out of film school, photography school, they would charge you $500 minimum.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's well worth it. But the real reason that I want chefs to do this is that it really gives them the control to create their social. So, one of the things that I advocate is, once you have your shot, do multiple angles of the same dish. Do a close-up shot. Do a vertical, do a horizontal. And then what you can do, like, is with 2 plates, you have a week's worth of social media content. In addition to your website photo, now you constantly feeding your content schedule, and you don't have to worry about getting somebody in and doing it or scheduling somebody. It's really done on your own time. So, the artificial light, lesson is very simple. It's the same exact as the natural light, except I explain this is what you buy, and I give you, like, you can buy these tools, and they're it's under $200, you'll have one light and a softbox instead of a window and a diffusion panel. It does the same exact thing. You know what
And
I'm saying?
and are you recording the videos? Is it your face and your voice? Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's great. And you shot it in New York?
Actually shot it up here.
Oh, nice. That's
I
great.
shot it at my farmhouse. So what I did was, I went to a couple of restaurants and I did some photography with some chefs, but then I also did a bunch of stuff that I styled here, like for the lighting tutorials and stuff. And so basically, what it the whole point is that, like, if you can control your content, then you can build your brand and make it anything you want. You know what I mean? Whereas if you hire other people to do it, then it's their vision. There's always like a filter in between, and you know it won't take any chef very long to do any of this stuff. And it's really, honestly, I've made it simple enough for a third grader, which is not an insult to anyone. I just
Right.
wanted it to be simple enough that like a kid could listen to these tutorials. But I recorded, so there's two parts to it. So there's the video lesson tutorial, which goes through a deck and it shows you, I'm talking, sometimes I'm on screen, sometimes I'm behind the screen, and I go through each lesson until it's finished. But then there's also a downloadable PDF
Oh,
of each lesson, so that in case you don't want to have to listen to the video while you're shooting, you could just pull that up on your computer
mhm.
and refer to that page and be like, oh, all right, I need to this is the lighting diagram. And then I'm doing some, like, multiple choice quizzes and stuff like that. Just I mean, if people want to do those, it's fine. But but again, it's super simple. Like, these I'm trying. I tried to take all the photo techno babble, because photographers love to, like, drone on about their f-stops and equipment and all this nonsense. And chefs don't care about it. Like, nobody cares how the sausage gets made. You just want to know the sausage is delicious. So,
Right.
like, that's really the premise behind this.
Yeah, and that's great too, to have it very simplistic, because a lot of chefs have a busy schedule, right? And so taking the time to learn as much as in such a small amount of time, and then trying to apply that is like, that's a feat, you know?
Yeah, it should take an average person less than a week to go through the 5 lessons that you have to do before you should shoot. And you just need a couple pieces of equipment, like really nothing, nothing pricey, and your phone. So, what I like to do is explain to people that, you don't have to understand every single thing in the course. You just have to understand the things that work for you. It's like, learning a piece of software. I edit in Premiere Pro. I don't know every single thing there is in Premiere Pro, but and if I need to find out how to do something, I do a YouTube, tutorial on
Right.
it.
Absolutely.
But what I've done here is I've taken all of that knowledge that I have and put it in one place, so that you don't have to go look for it, and it's always available to you. And
It's
once you
amazing.
learn these simple principles, you'll be able to improve. And I like to say, but you have to shoot, you have to practice. It's like if you picked up a guitar and you learned a song and then you didn't play it for 3 months. What are your chances of, like, remembering that song? But if you put that into practical practice, like every week, you don't even have to do it every day. Even like once a week, spend an hour doing shoot some food, or, maybe a couple times a week. you know the more you put into it, the quicker you'll learn. But again, like, you just have to follow their rest. They're pretty easy to follow. Like, you just have
Yeah.
to follow the recipes. The concepts aren't that difficult. I do get a little technical in one or two sections, just because I need to explain to somebody why they're doing something. So, like, I explain depth of field, but I do it in like a minute and a half. I'm like, this is what it is, and this is how you should set your camera to do it, your phone to do it. Not like, oh, big, crazy photo techno, nonsense and all that kind of stuff. I try to really make it as, for like layman's terms, not for, this is
Right.
not for photographers.
Right.
This is not to say that a photographer wouldn't benefit from this course if they don't know how to shoot food, but it really is for people who don't know anything about photography, and you can go from zero to start in less than a week.
Right. So, before we start winding down a little bit, what would be your one tip to chefs who are interested in food photography to help expand their brand? One tip.
The one tip is don't use crappy lighting.
Okay, that's a good one. I would say that's a good one, right? Yeah.
That steam table light, not doing you any favors.
Yeah.
That yellow light,
light.
even the light in the restaurant that's overhead, that overhead light, not doing you any favors.
No. Bar light.
You want to light food in a specific way, and I teach you how to do that. And food likes to be lit from the side or from the back. That's it.
That's awesome. So, where can people find you if they want to look up more about Bill Brady and the projects that you're doing, the course? How can people find you?
You can find me on the best way to find me actually is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And feel free to link in with me. Then you can DM me, and but I'm also setting up a Facebook group.
Okay.
To help people with the course to answer questions and solve for problems. It's a safe space. It's not like to be like, oh, your food, your photos suck. Like, well, this is how I would improve it. And maybe if you did this instead of that. And I really want to encourage people to learn how to do this so that they can really bring in customers.
Right.
The whole point is to bring in a customer.
Yep.
That's the game, right? So,
and is the Facebook page exclusive to someone who buys the course, or is this going to be open to everyone, or what's your take on that?
At the moment, I don't know.
Okay,
I'm being honest. Like,
that's fine.
I'm trying to figure it out. I think I might do it publicly.
Okay,
but I might do two. I might do one exclusively for people who buy the course, and then I might do a public one. I'm not sure yet. Like, I'm still fleshing this out. Like, the course is done. I'm platforming it right now, and it's ready. It's almost ready to go. I'm almost ready to launch it. But there's a couple, how there's a couple of things you have to work out.
Oh,
but, what I'll do is I'll send you all of the links and information once it's done, and
absolutely.
then you can include that in the podcast. So,
oh yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. So there's a couple of details that I haven't quite figured out yet, and it's just logistic, planning. But the course in and of itself is finished, and
right.
I could send it to anybody right now, like if I wanted to. So it's ready to go.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. You keep me updated, and then I'll update everything on the show and the podcast and the shorts and everything, so that as that starts to gain some traction and people want to look you up, they can find you. So LinkedIn,
good.
Bill Brady. They just look up your name, Bill Brady Photography, or do you have a handle?
I think it's Bill Brady Photography. Give me 1 second, I'll tell you. Sorry, I got a million windows going.
No, you're good.
It's linkedin.com Bill Brady Photography, like /IN/Bill Brady Photography.
Perfect.
Well, I'll send you the links to that.
And then also they can look you up on BillBradyPhotography.com, correct?
Yeah, I have a website, BillBradyPhotography.com.
Beautiful.
It's a little harder to find unless you type in the URL, because
right.
I don't know what's going on with the internet. But it sucks, man. It's like you go to type in a query for something, and it's AI babble and ads for stuff that you don't.
100%.
I don't understand like what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But to be perfectly honest with you, I mean, I get a lot of my information on Reddit now, and I do a lot of my information through. I talk to people directly on LinkedIn because I know that they're human beings.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
If who knows, like information is being changed in real time. Like it's hard to know what to trust.
It is 100%. Now we're moving into that era of AI where I think it's still kind of new, and then we need some time to perfect it, to trust it and everything else. But when I did my research on Bill Brady, I found a ton of stuff on you, man.
Oh, well, it's because I'm old and I've been around a while. But here's something interesting. I do want to say one thing about AI. And, a lot of people are thinking, oh, I can just create AI food photos. And you can do that. But number one, it's not quite there yet. And number two, it doesn't iterate. So unless you're like an AI ninja where you can prompt, like you can't create a menu with AI that has any consistency to it.
Right.
And the whole point of a brand is that it's consistent. So, 5 years from now, you're probably going to be able to do it. But as it stands now, I don't see that. I mean, I work in Photoshop. They have Firefly, Nano Banana, like those are really sophisticated, and it still doesn't quite. It's not really quite there yet.
It's funny that you say that. I do a lot of like the show artwork and stuff on Canva, and Canva just recently introduced an AI feature. And so I was playing with it the other day, trying to just get a random shot of mushrooms. And when it first generates, you look at it and you're like, oh, okay. But then when you blow it up even just a little bit and you look at it, you're like, oh, okay, this looks more like a painting than it actually looks like
Right.
a real shot. Right. And then so in the industry, for food, like it's super important, and not a lot of people are like, oh man, I got to have that mushroom dish from that painting, right? Like
Yeah.
you're relying too much on the perception instead of the reality, I think.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is it doesn't do high res.
Right.
So if you're and that's another thing. So if you're shooting with your phone camera, you can set it to a raw setting, like the Samsungs are crazy. They do like 200 megapixels, but you can print those. So if you want to do menu boards and you want to do printed material, if you don't set your camera to the right settings, it's really hard to print something.
Right.
And most people don't understand that, like, there's different settings in your phone to do higher res pictures. They just don't have it defaulted because it takes up a lot of space.
Right.
You know?
Yes. Yeah. I've noticed that too. I have the S25 Ultra, and I don't know anything about the podcasting or the shooting or camera. Everything is all new to me. And
Right.
I like to dabble and teach myself and read and research a lot of things. And I found that, just like you said, the Samsung cameras are absolutely wild, the amount of settings that you have, but it's so extensive that somebody like me who's, I can pick up a knife and I can make you a tomato sauce, right? But
Right.
the settings here, I don't know what each one means, and the words are really big. And then I'm like, you know what? Let me just dabble with what I'm used to doing so that I can just get what I
Right.
need to get done.
Yeah. So I literally explain what to set your camera at for your phone for food photography.
That's amazing.
It's a few quick settings, and then I also like explain, like, if you zoom in and your lens, like, how, like, if you blow in too hard with the lens, things get grainy.
Mhm.
Well, you can't exceed the zoom factor of a lens. Like, you just have to use that lens.
Right.
So rather than doing that, just go closer to the food.
Right.
Until you get that focal length. Like, so food photography, like medium telephoto lens, like I shoot with a 105 macro lens, and for my medium format, I shoot with a 120 lens. And basically what that does is it gives me like that medium telephoto, so I can be far away with the camera and it zooms in a little bit. But if I want to do a macro shot, like a really close up, I push the camera in and I flip a setting, and then it changes the focus. So like a normal lens will have you like your foot and a half, like, and then you can't get anything else in focus if you go closer. With a macro lens, you can actually flip a dial and go in really close and get like that really like close up piece of steak. But your phone has the same kind of settings. You just have to know how to
tweak it and do it and turn them on
and use them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's my advice.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Bill. I really do appreciate you taking the time and promoting your course. And it was really good meeting you, man. I'm super glad that we had this conversation. Let's do this again soon.
Likewise, man. I really appreciate the time, and thank you. You very, very good hosting, and I
thank you, sir.
I look forward to talking to you again. This is a lot of fun.
Excellent. I will. I'll keep you posted, and I'll send over all of your media stuff when I get everything done. Thank you so much,
You
Bill.
got it.
Well, chefs, I hope you enjoyed the conversation I had with Bill today. I thought it was a great insight to a component of the job that isn't discussed much in the industry. Make sure you check out Bill's new course when it comes out. I'll have all of the details in the description of this show, as well as theincrediblediscourse.com. I also have a blog up about this conversation with Bill that highlights my thoughts on his course and experience. So, if you want to support the show, you know what to do. Hit the like and subscribe button so you never miss an episode release. Check out theincrediblediscourse.com and sign up for our monthly newsletter for all the blogs, updates, resources, and merch, including this shirt I'm wearing right now. Thanks for joining me today. I enjoyed this format of interviewing guests for their insights of their specialties a lot. There should be 5 more guest episodes this season, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it. And I am Mark Grigsby, and this has been another amazing episode of The Incredible Discourse. See you next time.